right at the moment, most of the, in terms of scale of need, most of the ATMPs which are in the market are either for relatively rare diseases or subsets of a more mainstream disease, for example, relapsed and refractory acute lymphoblastic leukemia. But I think what we'll see as the next few years move on is that existing products start to extend their application, for example, into earlier in the clinical treatment pathway and therefore to many more patients. And we'll also see the next generation of products starting to come through onto the market. And so I suspect as we look over the next 5, 10, 15 years, we'll see a very significant expansion in the numbers of ATMPs deployed in the healthcare system.
I think the greatest medical need for advanced therapies today is for orphan rare diseases, as for primary immune deficiencies, metabolic disorders, genetic blood disorders as thalassemia and sickle cell diseases, as well as for muscular dystrophies and skin genetic disorders. Then of course for tumors and neoplasias, for ischemic and vascular disorders, and theoretically for any degenerative disorders due to the intrinsic ability of an advanced therapy to reshape the disability of some diseases. I think that the presence of centers of excellence is a fundamental requirement for the administration of advanced therapies. An ideal center of excellence should have an international reputation both in the management of the disease and in the use of the specific ATMP. It should have the willingness to work with the drug company that is providing to the development of the drug. It should be sustainable as well. It should have an holistic approach to the patients and family care. It should be accredited. This is a very crucial point in our experience for gene therapy based on hematopoietic cell transplantation. The accreditation by JC and FACT is a fundamental requirement because this allows the presence of an entire panel of operative instructions that are regulating and standardizing all the steps of the production of the advanced therapeutic drug. So another requirement for a center of excellence is to have an appropriate number of beds for the admission of patients requiring advanced medicinal products, as well as intensive care unit for the critical support of these patients, as well as a panel of multidisciplinary specialists that are caring about all the complications, the possible complications of the patients.
I don't think centres of excellence are the answer, but I certainly think they are part of the answer. And the reason for that is that there's a sense in which ATMPs are quite different from other pharmaceuticals, where the relationship between the pharmaceutical company and the healthcare system is very transactional. You manufacture a product and put it on the shelf. Here the healthcare system is acting as the provider of the starting material. The product itself is very complex, and the outcome of the product in the patient is also very dependent on how it's handled in the healthcare environment and how it's clinically applied and followed up. So it's much more of a partnership, and it also requires a lot more specialization and expertise on the part of the clinical team. So I think it's unrealistic to expect that will be very widely distributed across the healthcare system, at least in the first instance, and that most products will probably be deployed in a relatively small number of clinical centres of excellence, again, as I say, in the first instance, which might vary from product to product. So a centre of excellence for eye disease might not, of course, be a centre of excellence for hematological malignancies. The products are very complex, And it's particularly tricky if you're dealing in a clinical environment with a labile product, so a non-frozen product. So certainly, and particularly if that's very temperature sensitive, or whether it's fragile, say it's a tissue engineered product that's very fragile, it's going to take a lot of looking after in a very busy healthcare environment. So where it is possible for a product to be cryopreserved, either in liquid nitrogen or even better in a -80 freezer, that's much more commensurate with the way that the healthcare environment, where the hospital is used to managing other similar products like hematopoietic stem cells, for example. And also importantly, it decouples the delivery of the product from the treatment of the patient. If you have a product that only is labile and has, say, a 4 or 6 hour shelf life, the patient has to be ready to receive that product at that particular moment. And all sorts of things can happen in a busy clinical environment. The patient can get ill, the unit might need to be used for a more urgent patient. So a cryopreserved product gives the opportunity to bring the product in and then plan the treatment of the patient separate to that.
So it's a very, this machine is a very complicated machine, very sophisticated, requiring a capacity plan that has to take into consideration several needs. So the needs of the patients to be treated according with the priority for urgent treatment, the needs of the availability of the beds into the ward, the needs for available slots in the CMO to manipulate the medicinal product. So this very complex machine needs really flexibility from our point of view to compensate and to consent the dialogue between the several parties. The funding for treatment has to be in line with the regulatory scheme in which the patient is included. So, for example, for an experimental clinical trial, the company or the institution will pay for the treatment. As for an approved drug, the national health system or private insurances, in case of foreign patients, will provide payment for the clinical costs. But academia can anyway favor the collaboration of the industries in supporting in a more dedicated ways this path of treatment for some patients by favoring the collaboration with personalized and very peculiar projects, as in our case in Milan, by supporting the project Come a Casa, just like Home project, that is a project aiming at caring about needs of the families that are economical needs, logistical needs, emotional needs that are arising during a so long stay for the bone marrow transplant.
Well, clinicians, of course, are fundamentally advocates for the patient, and certainly, first of all, you need the expertise of clinicians often to deliver the therapy and to manage the patient both before and after the therapeutic intervention and to follow them up. But in addition, they may well act as an advocate for the introduction of a particular kind of treatment into the hospital. Both with the hospital general management, for example, and more widely with, say, commissioners. So I think that clinical voice is very important, and it's predicated basically on good dialogue between the manufacturer and the attending clinicians.